Brothers, welcome, man. I am so excited about this first phase of this podcast. Welcome to Black Beat Podcast Show, where we have conversations with our guests that are unapologetically Black in nature. I'm John Washington. I'm the editor-in-chief of Flossin Media and your podcast host for this episode. Now, I've been eagerly anticipating the chance to have a conversation with you brothers. The conversation is a conversation that only Black men can have with one another about the current state of our condition and how we need to be reacting or responding to those things that are affecting us in adverse or favorable ways. Joining me today in this dialogue are four Black men that have come to appreciate as a way of being ready to engage eagerly in often difficult but necessary conversations. Welcome, gentlemen. Let me go around the circle, and I'd like you all to please introduce yourselves and to tell us a little bit about the work you're currently doing. And I'd like to start with you, Cupid, since you've been the first on deck.
Yeah, so Cupid Alexander, Director of Strategic Initiatives in the Office of Mayor Ted Wheeler. Humbled to be on this with these esteemed gentlemen. Usually I have a lot to learn, so what I'm responsible for now is pretty much listening. So I come into spaces and listen and try and empower communities to be, on behalf of the mayor, to kind of determine their own destiny and determine what resources we have available to assist in that, knowing that it's never going to be enough. And I say that humbly, but I understand the system. So really trying to encourage change, but really here to listen and contribute where I can. And I'll keep it at that, keep it short.
Next up, Mr. Jones.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tony Jones. I'm the president of the Coalition of Black Men. We're a 30-year organization that has a long history of advocacy and work for the Black community specifically, hence our name. Brothers James Posey on the line here were one of the founding members that stood up in 1988. And kind of the same topic you're talking about now, John, you know, in terms of what is the Black narrative. You know, and that was the same reason that those brothers were founded back in the day. And even though I wasn't here, you know, I still had Black hair at that point, but still had the fire in my belly about it with regard to what's going on in our community. And part of the reason the coalition was founded was because the narrative was a false narrative that was given out in the quote unquote war on drugs, you know, crack epidemic. And these brothers led by Usini Perkins, Posey, Lorenzo Poe, Bruce Watts, Ralph Evans, some of those cats, and some of these cats that have gone before us really wanted to change the narrative and say, we are positive, productive men, and the only narrative we keep hearing is negative or a passive approach. These brothers really want to talk about a positive approach about what we're doing and what we have done and what we can do and what we will do. So we've done a number of things in mentoring, health and wellness, advocacy and economic development, reaching out, supporting the community, and also speaking up for our people. So that's what we do. As you know, John, we hail from the same part of the country, New Jersey, and you know, right now I have my own business and I'm doing construction management, and my hope is to manage our projects that we do going forward so we can have more wealth in the Black community. So that's my introduction.
Got you. But no one don't need to introduce Mr. Posey. He's been here, so he's next up on deck. How you doing there, James? Today, talk to me, baby.
Hey, John, thank you very much for hosting this podcast or Zoom presentation about Black men and what our, what our role is in this whole scenario going forward. So it's good to see you be able to do this. You got the skill set to bring all this stuff together, media, the whole 9 yards. And so I'm thankful that you're able to do that. And it goes back, I think way back 20, 30, 40 years ago when we didn't have email, and I had I had a Commodore 64. Some of these young dudes don't know what a Commodore 64 was. It's a little lunchback little thing that you couldn't even type on. And it's, I think about the technology and how things have changed over the last 40, 50 years. But unfortunately, the issues haven't changed that much. Same stuff that we were dealing with 40, 50 years ago are still pretty prevalent today. You know, I'm the founder of NAMCO, Oregon, National Association of Minority Contractors. There's another person that says she founded too, but I'm a founder of the founder.
Yeah.
I like that. There was another iteration of NAMCO before that person got involved, and then MCIP, and I've been involved with the Coalition of Black Men from way back when. You know, NAACP way back when NAACP was in over at King School. So George Hendricks way back when. So I've been around the horn a couple of times, and you know, it's really frustrating that we as Black men really can't come together. We can't seem to get the traction I think we ought to have. I see Johnny Lake is online here on base. I knew him when he had black hair too, way back.
Yeah. It's not the Lake right now. Hey, long anticipated. Boy, to you, Dr. Lake, it's been a long time. And happy birthday, my brother. I'm sorry to late, man, but I need to let you know. Happy birthday today.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to shut up and let Johnny get in. You know, he's a professor now. I knew him when he was barely out of kindergarten, but now he's a professor and doctor.
Yeah, right. Hey, Johnny wasn't no joke. He can run, but I'll tell you that. He can run. Run you to death, yeah.
So that's me, John. Go ahead, man.
All right. Thank you, bro. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Johnny,
Gotta laugh these days, bro. Y'all gotta laugh these days. I appreciate the laughter because there ain't much laughter in this real conversation going on these days. It's a luxury to see this many brothers at one time. I appreciate it. You know, we scarce around here. Coming to these conversations for me is always important because I think we have to have some control of our own destiny, I guess I'll call it that. We got to take more responsibility for our decisions and hold each other accountable and try to move forward. Had several conversations with people, but my name is Johnny Lake. I'm a survivor of U of O PhD program. I've been a professor for probably 20 years now, teaching people who want to be teachers, counselors, principals. But I also work a lot in the justice system. I train lawyers and judges and court systems people and all the people who got a lot of hands on our kids around equity and diversity and how bias and race and all those things actually play out in the justice system. Been doing a lot of national conferences around equity, diversity, and inclusion. That's the new code word. Every generation around, they come up with some new terms that's supposed to be describing working with our communities. And right now it's DEI. They even got an acronym for it, DEI. You'll hear them throw that out and everybody in the room is supposed to know what they're talking about. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, but you can ask them, give you a clear definition of those terms and they can't even define diversity, equity, and inclusion cogently. And so I think we're in a time where I call it a crisis. And not a crisis in terms of a disaster like a hurricane or earthquake, but a crisis which means it's a decision point. We're at a place where we have to make some decisions and you cannot stand still in the middle of a crisis. It's like coming to the crossroads, the old blues crossroads, the four-way stop. You get at the four-way stop, you can't stop there and stay. You got to decide which road you're going to take. And I think that's where we are now, because if we don't engage these conversations, this society is trying to go back to where it was before this virus. See, this virus came along and this virus didn't produce this inequity at all. The virus just pulled the covers off of it. and just showed us how inequitable the society has been for several generations. And so at this point, putting the covers back on and going back to business as usual doesn't serve our community as well at all. And so I'm glad to be included in this conversation, and hopefully we can continue these type of conversations, because I think our persistence and our continuity over time is really one of the things that I wish we could maintain. Our histories, as Brother Posey was talking about, go back a while, so we can all sit in the same room and talk about this effort, this governor, this legislator, this program, this, and we almost always end up in the same place. It ain't made that much difference for us.
You know, Johnny, like, man, my heart always fills with some love and joy, man. But it also fills with emotion whenever I hear you speak, and brother, whenever I come in contact with you over the years, man. You know, we've been warriors from way back, and you know, and I think that that's one of the joys. But as you said, when you're coming into this, I'm glad we can laugh for a moment, because let me tell you, just before we started this podcast, I was crying because I was looking at some stuff on CNN about the brother that got killed out in Minneapolis. And so, you know, but I'm getting tired of brothers coming on the TV asking the same question over and over again. What are we supposed to do? What should we do? How should we protect our kids? What, you know, where should they play? You know, and it got to a point, I don't want to get off script, but Johnny, you tend to take me off script, so I'm gonna stay on script on this one, because I want everybody to voice something here. So, you know, I asked you guys to join me here today because I have some concerns about the plight of the state of Black men in America. What sparked this desire to me to want to speak with you all here today was watching some of the things that have been unfolding during this pandemic. One of the things that got my attention centered on when the issue and conversation about relief funds, that they wanted to prioritize women and minority-owned businesses. And Johnny, you hit on that a little bit about that EEI. And it made me feel very uncomfortable, like I was invisible. Here was a structure that supposedly was set up to serve me, and they can't even acknowledge me by specifically saying Black businesses, nor, for that matter, prioritize our needs as Black males, even as we still register at the top of every disparity in every category of less than that exists. Since the Civil War, the affirmative action, from the Civil War era to affirmative action to diversity and now equity, I feel like a lot of other women and minority groups have been able to advance their agendas instead of actual Black males, who was, for the most part, the original intent of the benefit of the civil rights and all of those things that yielded as a result of those things. Now here we are, nearly $5 trillion been dumped into our economy to keep things normal. And I have to wonder, where was all the money when we were talking about reparations? After all, we've been fighting the white fear of virus for centuries. The question that I have for you brothers is, since the pandemic, how have you been experiencing this, and how do you feel as black male in your voice? How's it been represented during this time of the pandemic? So I'd like to, at any point in time, now as an order of conversation, y'all can, there's a few of us, so y'all can just take turns or however you want to, you know, this is wide open and I'm gonna leave it unapologetically. I'm not gonna make it organized in a sense. I wanna be like we are, that we talk to one another, okay? And so any one of y'all at any time on some of these topics you wanna jump in and have a conversation or talk about something, y'all go right ahead. But just be a little bit respectful of the airtime and giving others the opportunity to talk and communicate. So Johnny, you was on that conversation during that time, but I'd like to swing it back to Posey for a second and just get his feel about how he's seen some of this stuff, and then what is his thoughts about the plight in the state of in this country today, and what's going on for us during this time of pandemic.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, John, you know, like I said, I've been around this stuff for a very long time, and we as Black people, we're very articulate, we're very passionate, and when this stuff hits us, you know, all of a sudden we're going to jump out. Seems like everybody and his mothers now is after the George Floyd thing. It's our temperature rise, and then after white people pacify us, we'll calm down, and we won't see that many Black Lives Matter signs anymore, and we'll go back into the rut that white people are very comfortable in putting us in. And I could use anecdotes. Several years back, when I did trucking, I've been a blue collar kind of a person, so I was doing trucking about 15 years ago, and the Oregon Department of Transportation never gave the level of contracts to Black contractors, and we were just basically wilting on the vine. And so I got several Black contractors together, and I said to them, we need to close down I-5 from Seattle all the way down to Sacramento, so they will know that we exist. So, I got my truck and I was ready to go out there on I-5 and punch through the tires, let all the air out, let the police come and move us off of there. We can great national recognition, but nobody showed up but me. Hey, nobody showed up but me with my trucks. Let me just tell you. So, we do a lot of talk, but without the sacrifice of blood, in many ways, I may sound figuratively or literally, whatever you want to take it. White people are going to take us serious, and let me just tell you, this pandemic proves some things. White people, when you mess with their money, they get upset. You know what I'm saying? And I could give you another example. John, I was with Ron Herndon and them guys, and we have this big educational gap and everything. And, I was over SEI and all of them. We were sitting around, Black men, doing our macho thing. So I recommend that as long as we're in our community and white folk are over in the West Hills being happy and joyful about the high level of education their kids get, and our kids get 5th grade, degraded, our gap is, they're going to be fine with that. They're going to give us a lot of lip service. We're going to go to school board meetings and blah, 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 blah. But, so I said, why don't we take this issue up into the West Hills? Let's go up there on a Saturday morning, knock on these white people's doors and ask them, are they comfortable with our Black kids getting low grade education, so on, etc. We went up there about 2 weeks and everybody started getting scared. But the white people up there, they want to know what these Black people up knocking on their doors on, like Jehovah's Witnesses, So I said all that to say, at the end of the day, we do a lot of talking, but unless we were willing to throw our body against this issue, throw our minds, our body, our resources, I could go on and give you examples of where we do a lot of talking, but at the end of the day, we're not willing to put our bodies in front of this issue so people would know we're serious. And I'll stop there. There are other sets of circumstances I can tell you. You don't have to go that far. There are a few of us who would go down to City Hall or at the state legislature and talk about these issues, but are impacting our community. All you got to do is open your mouth. If you're going to talk in private, why don't you take it down to the legislative bodies and look at Lou Frederick up there. I beat him up about every other day. He don't even want to see me when I come in. But at the end of the day, I'm making a little joke about it, but at the end of the day, we have to push this agenda. If we don't push this agenda, no one will, And so I'll leave it with that.
Yep. Cupid, care to share on that one?
Yeah, it's hard to find. It's hard to follow Mr. Posey. I can only say this. Even as we consider these things, what do new tools look like? Because what I've learned from the gentleman on these calls, and I've done my own research, is that everything that has been brought up shows that these tools were never meant to have the inclusion that they aim to do, and the data shows that. So for me, it's a conversation about what do new tools look like that actually empower instead of exploit the communities that have been exploited. All of our data points show that no matter what it is, whether it's the outcomes for health disparities, outcomes for educational attainment, outcomes for wealth building, the conduits that we have to transfer income into wealth and opportunities to even have an income don't allow individuals to live their best life as compared to their peers in this community and nationwide, right? So for me, it's a constant conversation about what do new tools look like. And I don't know what that looks like, but I know that we can be informed by the individuals closest to the problems. So for me, it's empowering the individuals who are closest to the problems to actually be at the table to help change what the tools look like that allow them to use their skill set towards their own upward mobility. Because I don't believe that individuals just can't do it. And we have opportunities to create that because these are not naturally occurring phenomena. It's not like, you know, if you believe in God, it was on Moses's tablet that said you had to take out a loan in order to get this, that, or the other. These are man-made individual things that can be changed should people want to change them, or even if they shouldn't. I mean, there's a fundamental understanding that we have about how people attain things, and we say it's meritocracy, but we know it's not about hard work. You can work your entire life. It's never been about hard work. What it is about is the opportunity to transfer your hard work into something that's sustainable for your upward mobility, and it's creating the opportunities to do that. So for me, it's a constant reminder to continue to center that, because as soon as I empower the individuals to have that opportunity, their work ethic gets it done for them. You know, I've seen a lot of people throughout my life just work and work and work, and the resulting effect of their work is not the same across the board. And that's fundamentally kind of undermines what we say we believe in. So I'll keep it at that, because I'm more interested in hearing what the tested, tried, and true gentlemen have to say in regards to that.
Can I respond to that real quickly? Maybe not as quickly as y'all would like.
I'll tell you what, Posey.
Let me respond to that, John.
Go ahead, Posey.
Let me respond to that, John.
Drop that in Lakes. I was going to drop that in Johnny's lap.
But let me respond to that real quickly. Let me respond to that real quickly. Tools, private equity funds. Let me repeat that. Private equity funds, which Black people don't know a thing about in the lion's share. White people making money hand over foot. Your boss, Ted Willer, was the treasurer back many moons ago. He ran private equity funds for the city of Portland. Money went out to everybody. All these white firms making money, which fueled the gentrification, which is in our community. Black people didn't even know about it. They were so busy trying to dodge redlining. That's on the negative, that's on the defenses. But on the offensive piece, your boss, Ted Willer, was the treasurer back in that day. We didn't have any Black private equity funds. And if you look, you pull the cover back and you look at all the gentrification and where all the money is flowing, it's flowing through some of these tools, these instruments that white people use every day without even thinking about. We're not even anywhere close to that market. Fortunately, I'm involved with a guy, you all know Opio. Opio is running a private equity fund right now that is Black owned, and reinvesting back into Black businesses, trying to get Black businesses linked to some of these huge amounts of money, trying to fund those projects that are really generic to what Black people do. I'm just finding out about it. But I'm telling you, as a young cat, you should be in a position to be able to talk about that leg. That's only one leg and tool that we have within our community that's available to us now that I didn't even know anything about it. I sit 20 years in the seat of a dump truck hauling dirt across the city thinking that's gonna make me some money, when these white cats are making money hand over foot by moving their pencil from one spot to another. That's the sort of thing, as a community, we have to grasp where the money is really going, who's getting it, and how can we get our piece at the table. I'll shut up.
For that. Johnny, you care want to share on that one?
Yeah, I appreciate all the comments. I think, as I said, we're looking at a crossroads, and there's opportunities when there's this kind of change in our culture and society. We are realigning certain things. I think the consideration of tools made me think about how the rules change when we get involved in the game. And this goes to what Mr. Posey was saying. Gentrification, I watched it happen in Portland. I was interviewing Black elders in Northeast Portland prior to gentrification. Their houses weren't worth anything. They couldn't get that money to redo their houses. One Black man told me, he says, when I moved on this street, everybody on this street was Black and there was one white family. He said, I'm the only Black family left on this street. And he said, those young people across the street, they got that house, and he said they got that money from that reinvestment downtown, and they able to fix their house up. He says, I couldn't get none of that money. And so the way gentrification happened, I didn't see a white person on Mississippi Street when I used to take those elders over there to eat. I always took them on Mississippi Street to eat, and we didn't see a white person. And I went back 5 years later to redo my interviews and to close out the project. And we went to Mississippi Street, and me and Mr. Cheney, an older Black man, we didn't see another Black person on Mississippi Street. Everybody was white. And every house I looked at that was for sale by a white real estate agent. And so when we think about tools, where were those tools when we owned that property? Where were those tools when it was our community? And so when we look at the structural problems, the system leverages those resources and those tools toward the people that they want to. And if the young brother is inside the room with these people, then we have to be included in those decision-making processes. There were houses over there, Bubba, that the people, the house was worth $150,000 when I met a couple of those people. And then the cheapest house you could touch over there after gentrification was $450,000. Same houses. All they did was came in, did the yard, painted, maybe did the roof, and tripled the value of those houses over there. And that money did not go into our community, which is where it should have gone if gentrification was done without race being a factor. Mississippi Street over there, the history, Mississippi Street died when they put the freeway through there. There were more businesses in Portland in 1959, Black businesses in Portland in 1959 than there are right now. And when they put that freeway through there, they did not put an exit on Mississippi Street. And for the young brother who's in the room that's making those kind of decisions now, so that they decide to fly right over our community and kill all those businesses on Mississippi Street and enrich the people farther up or farther down. And so I think learning these games, like I told my mother, I said, dealing with white people, I said, as soon as you learn the rules, they change the rules.
Absolutely.
As soon as you learn the rules, as soon as you start being competitive, they change the rules. And we got to be that flexible ourselves when we are engaged in these conversations. Because like I was told getting a PhD is, the ultimate. Getting a PhD, I'm technically unemployable with most of these crazy white people that I have to deal with here in Oregon because I tell them the truth.
You should have came to me. I would have told you that, bro. I got a master's, but I knew after that I went on.
Yeah. I'm with you.
No, I get more work. I get more work in New York, and back east, state of Washington, California. I get work everywhere except here in Oregon. And fortunately, I'm pretty good at what I do, so I have a pretty good catalog of work, so I don't have to worry about getting work.
Yeah.
But it speaks to the nature of the isolation and exclusion that a brother gets here when you dare to show up to the room and tell them the truth and be honest about the way this game works. If you can stay behind and stay in their corner, they use you against another brother who is showing up, and you may get something, but your community gets left out of the deal.
Yes.
And
Classic stuff.
Mr. Jones, you want to weigh in on that one? Or?
Oh, I got a lot I can say.
Come on. Right.
Yeah, I think I was asked to participate in the debate from the organization that James founds, NAMCO, Oregon. And I made everybody laugh in the room, but it wasn't really funny. I said, my question to the mayoral candidates was, Black community's been in a damn pandemic. Everyone thought that was funny, but I didn't think it was funny. Our people are dying. We're genocide now. That's what's happening. We've stepped to a new level. You know, when our folks are, you know, living, like I had to argue with my brother-in-law, my folks are living in close proximity in New York, and they're working in these low-wage jobs. We're in close proximity to each other and not getting paid living wage. And as my esteemed brother from church, Dr. Robert Hughley, says, we got a daggone plague going on, and our people are dying. It's a serious issue. So my comment, you know, so it's funny, James, that question got axed from the list because it was me, Tony Jones, James, too militant. But that's really what I felt in my heart when I think about what's going on now. And the sad thing is, you know, it's been no change. And as we've all many of us, we've all touched on it. Well, I try to work by the rules. I try to work within the system. You know, many of us are spiritually based, and so we try to be honorable and decent and upstanding and right. I'm not saying you should be a daggone crook, but you know, you felt like if you lived your life that way, that, you know, the benefits will flow to our people, which is what we wanted to see. And that didn't necessarily happen. Not necessarily, that hasn't happened. Heck, man, we can't even go out for a jog, can't even walk down the street without getting killed. More or less just harassed by the police and getting killed. So, as we all know, as you all talked about, this is serious, very serious, and it saddens me to the core. I mean, I walked out of my house the other day, pissed off about the brother in Central Park, only to have a white guy stop me to apologize because about the brother in Minnesota, which, you know, just kind of just brought me to my knees almost in walking down Going Street. So, yeah, it's a plague for us. It's not just a pandemic, you know, in terms of what it's doing to our community.
Well, that's interesting, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Were you coming to your end on that conclusion on that, or was you?
Yeah, I can conclude on that because I really think that we have to talk about it in that gravity of a situation, you know, when we're talking to white folks. As James was saying, pretty much died. But what I will close on is what James touched on, is I've come to the conclusion, man, is that we can't work with these folks. We got to build our own economic system. We got to own some assets. We got to own some wealth. We got to own some property. We got to make some money. And then we take the money and do for our people what needs to be done. Not money just to put in your pocket, but money so you can develop programs for at-risk kids. So you can develop things that you think that your employees need. So you can develop, you know, support your family with healthcare if you're an employer. We have to control the wealth so we can do what we need for our community.
Got you. Now, I'm seeing some things here, so I'm going to probably change up a little bit of script to create a little bit of agitation because, you know, that's that clinical nature in me. Mm-hmm. But I got a question because I observed Cupid, and I specifically invited him to this conversation knowing that he was a little younger than the other members that were here. And so, Cupid, when you talked about new tools, can you talk a little bit more about new tools? You're waiting on new tools. Are you saying you want new tools to address the issue, or you tired of hearing about the old stuff from the old people, from us old men, or from our community about the limitations we have versus moving forward? Is there some? Could you speak a little bit more about what you're trying to say?
So I would never say that I'm tired of old tools or old people, or I wouldn't call anyone old, because I understand that the only way that I can learn is to learn what was done. And John, you and I were talking about this. People are constantly saying that I wasn't here, it was the past, yet we constantly celebrate the past. 4th of July. Our legal system is based off precedent. things that happened in the past. So for me to move forward, to understand what's failing us, I have to understand how it failed us. And when I'm talking about new tools, it's because these tools are made by people. I was going in about opportunity zones, right? And I'm sure you all are familiar with opportunity zones. The reason why I disagreed with opportunity zones, and I brought this up in our office, and I brought it up to like Prosper Portland and things like that, is because in order for a investment to drive into an opportunity zone, first of all, it has to be 50% or more individuals who are making 80% MFI, median family income, or less. And then you have to have capital gains. So individuals in that neighborhood cannot invest in their own neighborhood, and that's a tool we have right now. So I'm saying like tools like that don't allow you to invest in your own neighborhood do us no good, and it creates a perpetuation of you needing to be poor in order to receive assistance. And so when I'm looking at things like that, that's all based off the information I've learned from individuals like this on this call. And I know I have so much further to go because I did the whole school thing. I worked for HUD for 12 years. I got 2 masters, 1 in real estate development. I serve on national board. And yet and still, these issues that you all are talking about and can say we had the same conversation when we were your age about the same things tells me so much more than I can describe. So when I'm talking about new tools, I'm talking about thinking outside the box in a way that allows me to understand how these tools are used and to suggest a new one, right? So a common example of one that has had some success is when we were talking about land trust models. It doesn't work for everybody, but it allows you to build some sort of equity, and that was brought on by Black farmers, right? And so even though the traditional market, with all of the reasons we know why, when you have Central City 2035, Central City 2050, where you're being planned out, if you're not at the table, of course, you know you're on the menu. So it's so many multi-level conversations that need to be had when the assessment of value is created on a system that never included you in the first place. So as we think about what new tools look like, I'm exploring every single possibility because there is an economic system, and the economic system for me is based, I tell people it's fake. And the reason why it's fake is based off confidence, right? The stock market is based off confidence, not necessarily supply and demand all the time. And for the younger generation, we're having to have a conversation right now because you can feel that anxiety of the elimination of opportunities versus a mentality that says, how do I create opportunities? And so when I'm talking about new tools, it takes into consideration everything that came before me because our system is set up off of precedent. And when I'm determining like what new tools are outside of the box that we exist in. And when you work in city government, sometimes you're not the best position to create that because your job is predicated on the system that you're in. And I recognize that, which is why I said this has to be led and empowered by the community.
Well, so then,
respond to that, John?
Sure, Posey, you can. But just remember, as we move into work, we're going to stay in these weeds for just a minute. But we're going to try to make our way out of that into some kind of what it's going to look like after this when we come back to quote unquote normal. So
yeah, I just want to say that this young man, I'm very impressed with his insights beyond what they tell him, because he really is really scoped it pretty well. The game is not the game that we think it is. The game is very, very different. And unless you're inside, unless you're at the table or you behind the scenes and you working these deals and you see what the real deal is, we never get to see that. I can tell you for a fact, just working in construction, you never see what the real numbers is, where you make profit and how you move the agenda and so forth until you at the table. We had to have a white boy who worked for us go in and show us what the game is. I mentioned his name, you guys probably know him, but he comes back and tells us, oh, y'all was way out there. Y'all were nowhere close to bringing home this deal, because we're not at the table. We're not a part of that inner circle, as it were. But let me just say to you, Cupid, I think you're on the right track. We have to find ways within the existing system to use it to really get what they don't think we ought to get, if that makes any sense to you. At the end of the day, these opportunity zones were created to do some good stuff, but they've manipulated them, they've made them, and we're sitting here quiet as a church mouse, not having an end product to be able to take advantage of those opportunity zones, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're lambs to the slaughter, as it were, financially and so forth. So I say to you, when you're looking at these systems and you see where they're going and where they're not going, you know, share with the rest of us so we can weigh in and we can help change policy, we can change direction, we can put provisions in. Let me just give you an example. On the I-5 project that they're talking about, and you know, all the black gentrification and so forth that's happened on the I-5 project, the city is really not at the table. I know you think y'all are, but y'all really not at the table. The decision is going to be made by ODOT, $1 billion with a capital B that's going to be made on that project. Do you know in the specifications for the recruitment of the general contractor on there, there is no talk about equity per se. It's a general thing, and they know that that whole I-5 corridor was gentrified by, you know, against black people. And Prosper Portland's talking about all this black stuff, how we've been screwed and everything. But unless those documents, those construction documents, those legal documents about what the outcomes are going to be, we're going to be doing the same. I want to cuss on this thing here. John's got tender ears, so I don't want to cuss on it. but the deal is going to be the same because the people is going to get immediately the signal that they talking the good stuff, but we know we're going to circumvent this thing. And so the game rushes on. This becomes a monopoly game, back and forth, and we wind up all frustrated, and you know, everybody takes home the big the big profits and so forth, and we'll be here holding the back. Cities involved in this, because let me just explain to you, people already know this. ODOT does construction, and they're going to do construction. They ain't into equity. They don't care nothing about no equity. The city where the majority of us live and we have our being in the heart of this urban environment are going to suffer the consequences of us not directing ODOT to spend that money where it ought to be. Take advantage of the stuff. This is how you do reparations without doing reparations. Redirecting that money, make sure that it's accountable for what the growth and development of what our community needs to be, and make it work the way it's supposed to work. So, I'll leave it alone.
Go ahead,
I'm emotional about that.
But in this one, not unless somebody got a pressing that they want to make a contribution to this, I want to turn this a second, and I want to ask a basic pertinent question now that why do you believe America has such a black male fear? What is the fear that America has of the black male, and why do you perceive that exists? Any one of y'all can jump on that. Do you perceive that America have a fear of the black male?
Listen,
I'd like to hear from the professor.
Well, I'm going to say this one quick thing. Ron Wyden held a business meeting for people yesterday. Listen to me on this. He had it for minority business. Ron Wyden, the congressional delegation. Check this out. He had Nikenye, who I like, who's a pretty decent person, but it was about small business, minority business, but they put a black woman up there to facilitate this meeting. White boy, Ron Wyden, knows what he's doing. He couldn't find a legitimate black business person to host a black event that is basically participated by 100 people. But the prototype for us is a black woman who runs a nonprofit, not even a business. I ain't got nothing against nonprofits, don't get me wrong on that. Wasn't even a business. A black businessman could have been there. Who exemplifies in our community the black businessmen? You understand what I'm saying to you all? They're trying to relegate black men down to nothing. And people who have power to do that, i.e. a Ron Wyden, i.e. a Merkley or Blumenauer, all the rest of these white guys, want to make sure that black men doesn't rise to the top to be able to represent our people. That's my opinion. Shut up, James Posey.
That was real, and I do appreciate that. It just continues to reverse some other stuff that goes into the invisible man. And I did remember you posted something on Facebook one time about that brother who has a similar name of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who wrote that piece on the Invisible Man. What's his name?
Ralph Ellison.
Ralph Ellison.
Right, right. And he continues that. He started that discussion. I'm sure it was more than that. But this whole notion about the invisible man or black male fear, Johnny, can you sort of scope that a little bit for me, man, and tell us a little bit about what your perception of that is all about, and how do we move beyond it, or some suggestions and thoughts about it? Just frame it for me, will you please?
It's rather complex because it's a combination of race and gender and class. If you think of what America was defined around, the founding fathers were white males with money, property, and power. This is the definition of the American. The American. Every one of these privileges was only a privilege because it was defined in contrast to the people who did not have these privileges. So being a woman naturally meant you were disadvantaged. You got born, whoop, you ain't done nothing. You automatically disadvantaged. You born as a person of color in this system, you ain't done nothing to gain privilege or lose privilege, but you automatically disadvantaged. And so every privilege is related to an unprivileged. So white supremacy depends on black failure. Du Bois said, the white man says he's so afraid of the black man in America because the black man is incompetent. But Du Bois said that is not true. He said a white man is so afraid of the black man in America because he knows that the black man is competent. And so given a fair opportunity, I think that that's the reason for racism. That's the reason for these barriers. That's the reason they had a rule during slavery that a black man could not have a stick in his hand. That if a black man had a stick in his hand and a white man told him to drop it, he had to drop it or the white man could kill him and would not be charged with any kind of crime of murder.
That's still going on.
And like the historian told me, he says there must have been some brothers doing some bad things to white people with some sticks. For them to have to come up with a rule that deprived a black man of the opportunity to hold a stick. Now, if you transfer that to business or politics or housing, all of that stuff, all those rules that were developed to keep us out wasn't developed to keep us out because we were incompetent or could not perform. It was leveraged to leverage the advantage to the white people. And so for the fear, when I first got to Oregon, there was no black men in the Capitol. Bubba, you remember this. Every legislator down there was of color, was a black female. Right. And one of my friends came from back east, and he asked me something that I hadn't thought about until he asked me. He said, where's the strong black men in this state? He says, every agency we go in, anybody who's in any position of authority and power of color is a woman. And I started looking there, and it's like you can't find them. A strong brother don't last in these settings, and it's because we are, if you think of gender and race as 2 points of competition in this society, gender and race, gender and race, gender and race. So President Bush, in order to counter the issues of race and gender, brought in Condoleezza Rice. If Condoleezza Rice didn't have a brain in her head, she served the purpose that white man needed her for, which was to counter any claims about racism or sexism. And she played her role very, very well. That's why she's still to this day considered successful in the way she played her cards with this man who didn't serve our community very well at all. And so if you come forward and look at how we are seeing these things play out now, bringing us in the room actually is probably the ultimate challenge. Bringing us in the room and to have to address not only the issues about race, but also the issues about gender. We are competitors. And so when we think about the fear thing, it's like women, I think there's been 2 or 3 women who call the police on black men recently in the last couple of weeks.
At least two.
How did they know that would work? I mean, how institutionalized is this issue of the fear of black men if a random white woman knows that she can just pick up the phone and act scared and please immediately send the police and know that they're gonna come with their guns out and target this black man?
We can
And
blame.
so that's why I say it's complex.
Yeah.
For our discussion here, I think we are competitive.
Yeah.
We
But
are capable. And
we
in the
blame
history
John,
of our,
we can blame John's profession. We can blame the media on that. John's profession.
well, the media is one of the tools. But back to the young brother's points, we are able to compete in these rooms. You know, when you cite your education and your experience and things like that, I guarantee you there's probably not a white boy running around there in Portland who got your background, you know. And so the ability to make that space for people like you to do this work is really important. We can infiltrate these systems and we can cause them to work. When we show up, I used to show up at the Capitol. Bubba remember this. And if 3 of us went in the Capitol, I think you might have been you with me that day. 3 of us went in the Capitol. How many security did we have to talk to before we could get into where we was going? We were in the Capitol the moment we got in that door. Now, I always used to say, well, imagine 20 of us brothers going down there or wherever. If it's your department there in the city, bro, imagine 20 of us showing up. We don't have to have but one brother talk. The rest of us don't have to say nothing. We can have one brother say, we represent the community and we want to know what's happening here and how can we participate in this conversation. And so I think when you say new tools, I think there's some ways we can work these tools that exist as you described and give us more opportunity for access.
Hey, John, I just want to say one word on your question, and really the one word answer. There's 2 words maybe, but capitalism. You know, white men are driven by capitalism, period. You know, and so they're going to knock out any competition to their money.
Yep.
They even knock out their damn selves. But they know that the true narrative of the black man, if it comes through, it's pretty harrowing. So they'll do anything to not have that narrative on top of our ability outshine them. They'll do anything, which they have. You know, paint bad movies about us, pictures. You know, why are women making these calls? Well, all that what they see on TV, how it's portrayed. So it's all driven by capitalism. So
I agree with that 100%. And you know, if I had the time and the wherewithal to be able to do it, I would go through this last election and I would see who supported who, and I would put dollar increments on what those value propositions were relative to them, and you could tell a story. You could write a narrative on how this election went based upon who put the dollars in on what campaign and what who they supported. I wish I was smart enough to be able to do that, but that's the sort of sophistication and tools we need as Black people to see not only where we're going, but to know what the future, what the past has been, and how do we navigate through a future system with that. Those are the sort of tools that are absent in our community. White people are doing this already. That whole they have a autopsy, as they call it, on this whole election. They've counted all the numbers. They know exactly who did what, when, where, and how, and they can predict what the election is going to look like, in August and in November. We're not there. You follow me? Does that make any sense to you all? Maybe I'm talking to myself.
No, I feel you. And John, to kind of give a different perspective along the same lines, I think it's unique when Black men come into spaces and they can meet you at an intellectual, physical, and just a technological understanding. And when the whole premise of your argument has been based on they cannot do those things, it changes the conversation. And as we've held on to that belief that has been untrue, it makes people uncomfortable. So when I see individuals come in, it makes me proud, understanding that we have a whole system that was falsely based on your inability to do that. And then when you clearly and unapologetically come in having that skill set, people don't know how to react when they're talking to a system that has empowered them based on a false pretense, right? And my whole understanding of it is like, we owe these things to people because they pay taxes. They pay taxes, right? The whole shift of wealth has happened as a result, as an investment that disadvantaged them per the taxes that they were paying or the work that they were unpaid for, not because of their effort. And so when they have an understanding of not only how the tools work, but they have a generational understanding of how we got there, and then they have an understanding of what new tools would look like, it changes that dynamic that doesn't advantage someone to your disadvantage. And when you have no concept of understanding how that would work for you, it scares you. And so I clearly see, and especially, intergenerationally, that there are people who are skilled beyond what they're capable of indicating. They've always been able to understand. It's like knowing several languages, and they didn't know that they knew several languages. We have policy experts that don't even know that they're policy experts. They're required to understand deeply, like Mr. Posey, how these systems overlappingly work and where the pivot points are to create opportunity that creates the income that then transfers into wealth if invested correctly. So it's weird for me, because when I'm in these rooms and we're having these conversations, I'm like, we're a minority as a result of a numerical assessment. And that's it. We're just outnumbered. Once you get that understanding, it makes people scared again when the premise is that you're not good enough. And then you show that not only do you know the tools better, you're required to know them intricately just to scratch out a living. And that's not even an assessment of like what your real skill set is worth. So that's kind of my response to that.
But here's my next move with this, because and I look at Cupid and I see Cupid, I see myself, I see Johnny, I see James, I see Mr. Jones, the whole way in Cupid, as we were in that time, coming through that range, coming through that field, coming through that path. That courage, that ability as a young person, in spite of the ceiling that has been placed on you, you still push beyond it and push through it. But what is that substance, okay? And so what I like to do is, as we transition, and I know we're running up on our time, is that here we are. We've been here, as Posey said earlier, a number of us, the scab has been peeled off. We're in the midst of this. We see the dog loose off the chain. We see him running around biting us, killing us, destroying us, all of that. And then they talk about coming back and being back to normal. So what is y'all's vision as what business as usual and normal should look like for us? What is that ideal that we have coming out of this, of what we don't want to go back to and what we see as the next step to begin to address some of these concerns and needs we have as a community and as a Black man? Not so much as all the other stuff, but more so about what we're trying to achieve and accomplish and what we don't want to continue to happen to us. So y'all elaborate a little bit on that. Anyone of y'all can step up on that voice. And then keep in mind when you address that, is that this conversation about the governor's office, about this $2.5 billion, if it was able to be placed in a strategic way, how would you see us using that money to begin to rectify some of these issues that we have been historically dealing with?
Well, I think it boils down to Black self-determination. Really, it really boils down to we controlling our destiny, me controlling our assets, really our attitude about our own self-worth, for starters, and then that we are worthy and it's due us, and that we should have the assets and resources we have to need to take care of ourselves. So when you mentioned the dollar amount, for me, it's kind of like what Posey touched on. My mindset now is probably twofold. One, sort of the economic education of our people about money and how to use it to do the right things, not just to pocket it. And then the other part is to make investments with Black business owners that give a damn, that really will be about hiring our people and putting them to work. And there's examples out there right in our community that people are doing it. And instead of just asking for, the data for COVID, which I get it, but really, like you said, we want $1 billion of that dollar to invest in these number of properties and have the outcome of these number of jobs for people and this number of homes that they're actually going to own. That's what I want to see.
So let me weigh in, and For me, it's about a plan. It's about a master plan. I'm looking at Cupid here. We're fortunate to have a brother that can put all this stuff together. But in a Chicago or Atlanta, we got 9 or 10 Cupids running around there, with the same capabilities, ability to do that. We got 1, maybe 2 Cupids running around here, but we don't have a plan. And we're divided by various factions in our community. They played us so well. We got people out here who are purported to be doing one thing, they doing something else. But there is no cohesive agenda for us to look at as a roadmap for changing the dynamics in our community. If I was God, I could go ahead and take my magic wand and hit it over Cupid's head. I'd make him mayor of Black Portland. I'd bam, hit him, give him the wherewithal, the powers to engage, to use a Johnny Lake and all the, I've tried to engage our educational system. It's over there and all this intellectual stuff they got over there and books sitting on the shelf and crap. Weigh that in along with the data, put together a plan systematically how we get out of this thing, bring the political forces to bear to make the dynamics occur in our community where we're not just talking this stuff, but we're actually implementing a plan that really is calculated to achieve results, not to be, most of the stuff we do now is just political sideways kind of garbage in which we're just trying to get through to the next election or the next program. But at the end of the day, if you want a house built, you have to have a plan. You have to have specifics in the plan. You have to dialogue what the plan is, and then you got to get about building the house. You cannot sit on the sideline and have a nice, pretty conversation about the house you want. You have to make it happen, and you have to make it happen incrementally, and then you have to put the investments in it to make it work. So that's what I think we're missing in our community, is a plan that will bring these various resources together and orchestrate a process by which we can improve ourselves. That's not that hard. That's just common sense, y'all.
Thank you, James, on that. Late?
The miners used to take a canary in the mine shaft with them because the canary has a weaker respiratory system. When the canary dies, they knew it was time to get out of there. I think what COVID has done is shown who the canaries are in our society and the people who are dying the quickest and the most. Special needs people, I've been talking to some of them. They said, try to find some instructions for disabled people about how to be healthy during this COVID crisis. They said there ain't none. And so it's exposed, again, the flaws in our society that disadvantages the weakest and most vulnerable parts of our society. To put this back together, those needs are going to have to be addressed. Healthcare, for instance. You cannot solve a pandemic with everybody unless everybody has access to some kind of healthcare in order to even be healthy. And it's exposed the lack of insurance and jobs. I mean, decent jobs that pay somebody enough money to actually live. $1,200 a month. I asked several families, how long would that last you? 1 month. And they're back in the same hole they were in. And so at the corporate or structural level of our society, we have to start realizing what is the responsibility of government to its citizens in terms of living wage jobs, health care, health insurance, not letting people be exploited in their housing or living situations, because you got Section 8 people. There's one, I got a call from Portland. She's paying $3,000 a month and said the house smells like pee. There's leftover stuff from the previous tenant, and they don't even want to change the carpet. And this money comes from the government into the pocket of some investor or some financer who owns that house. This poor woman, everybody gonna blame her for being a Section 8 recipient, and she's basically just getting pimped by somebody else who's getting that money. And she's glad to get a house, so she's willing to take any kind of house she can get. And so I think probably in accord with Mr. Posey, any plan needs to hold accountable the structures and institutions. See, there is a responsibility government has to its citizens, and not just the ones who have the money. They probably have more responsibility to the more vulnerable citizens. And so when we look at what has been revealed, the solution is to address the failures that I think are not new. As I said, these are historical failures of our communities to help support all of its citizens. Those are some of the things that I think our communities need to be at the table in these conversations. The education game is covers pulled off of it. I am so sick of educators. I mean, we've been closing the achievement gap ever since I've been in Oregon, and we ain't closed no achievement gap at all. And they still want to talk about diversity training and these teachers. I said, these teachers didn't have relationships with our kids when they had them in school 5 days a week. So how in the hell you think they're gonna have relationships with them now, and they're on a computer or call them on the phone?
Well, this.
And so when we come back, are we gonna allow teachers to fall right back into the same pattern of ignoring our children and not building responsible relationships with them so they can meet their needs? We act like that's something new. It's not new. And so the same expectations, I think, go for all of the structural, the governmental organizations. We have to be in the room, and we have to call these people to account. And we do need to have a plan in accord with Mr. Posey.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lake. Mr. Jones, you got anything you want to share?
No, I mean, I think I spoke in the beginning, and yeah, one thing I would say about the plan that James touched on in the beginning, and I think that's where we as humans struggle, and particularly as it impacts our Black community, impacts deeply. It's something I struggle with, to be quite honest with you, man, is you gotta lay your life on the line for this. You just got to. It's the only way it's going to happen.
Yeah.
You're going to have to give up something that's dear and precious to you to move from point A to point B, just to get to move from point A to point B. So part of the plan has to be, that activist plan. And as you, in the beginning of the meeting, John, you talked about warriors and soldiers and what have you. That's what it takes. It really takes warriors and soldiers on the front line as part of that plan to be out there no matter what happens, that they hold their position. And I think that's part of the key for a plan being successful. And we got to have the plan for us. I'm just tired of going to Ted Wheeler, period, because he ain't going to do shit. He don't care. He says he cares, but he's part of the system. We've got to care to make our own system. That's it.
So let me say one quick thing, John. Let me say this one quick thing. Some of the stuff that Tony's talking about is spiritual. And y'all might not want to hear this, but at the end of the day, how many cars can you drive? How many pairs of shoes can you wear? How many houses can you live in? How many good look haircuts can you get? I'm just saying, this stuff is mere materialistic bullshit in terms of what our value propositions are in our community. We have to make a decision that we want our community. And what white people don't fail to understand is if we live better as Black people, they will live better. We're the parameters about how life exists on this planet. Because if we're living okay, everybody and their mama will be living okay. They don't get that. So they should invest in us, and we should make them invest in us, and we should pressure them to understand that the very existence, their very survival on this planet is contingent on our survival and how we navigate this system in America. America is crazy to do what they're doing. And let me tell you, when you cut through all this stuff, pandemic and all the other stuff, it's about the hatred they have for Black people and their unwillingness to accept us as human beings, as God's creatures. And that's why I say it's spiritual, because we are God's creatures, and do to the least of them your brethren.
Thank you very much, James.
Here's one point I'd like to throw in: collectivist cultures versus individualistic cultures. America, we talked about meritocracy, individualism. All of those things are the dominant culture themes of American society. Those were never parts of our community. Collectivism is more the way our communities have worked. And in line with what Mr. Posey is talking about, claiming all of the resources and all the money for ourselves is really not an ethic that our communities have been able to sustain. We have always had to reach out to our brothers and sisters. Within our own families, we've always had to help each other. And that model of community is foreign to dominant culture. And so we have to keep in mind, we are a different culture than dominant culture, and not necessarily in competition with each other as much as trying to help each other to achieve.
Right, John, and I don't know if you wanted my response, but
Sure. I'm sorry if I didn't get to you.
It's okay. I was listening first and speaking second. So I think it's important. You know, I second everything the gentlemen have said. Of course, their experience is something, and their intelligence that has to be respected. And at the same time, I know that sometimes there's just generational divides as to how we think about things. So I know that some of the things that are on you all's radar are just not on young men's radars. They're just, it just isn't. They're not thinking about these things in the same way. They're not seeing themselves in the same way. And, you know, there's a culture that allows who they are to be defined by someone who's not them. And determining what success looks like and what freedom is has always been a hard conversation. So in kind of ending this, I think there needs to be more intentional conversations like this intergenerationally, where hard questions are asked, just so the information can be exchanged so we can build these pipeline legacies. Because if I'm not asking you, I'm not learning that you had that same conversation to the same T, per the same words 25 years ago.
Exactly.
Right? And so for us, I mean, you know, I don't really have anything to add other than a unique desire to continue to have and cultivate this space where it's like, okay, we don't have to agree, but discrimination agrees completely, right? It doesn't just like the most equalizing factor that we have is discrimination, taxes, and death, right? It doesn't discriminate against you in the same way. It's a unique thing. So that would be the only thing. Other than that, you know, we recognize the systems. The intent of the systems hasn't been to center your success, but how do we change that? What do new tools look like? And how do we continue to have these intentional front-end conversations? And a conversation not about reparations, because that's a different conversation. A reconciliation conversation, knowing that unless the conversation about reparations includes a number that's uniquely more extensive than what can be even imagined and creates a basis for which that's funded, then all of these are conversations about reconciliation, knowing that these individuals are full, complicated human beings where the uniting factor was discrimination, but they're unique and they weren't seen as such. So that's all I gotta say. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Cupid. It took a special set of circumstances to get us here, and it's going to take a special set of circumstances to get us beyond here. I think this, and as I conclude this conversation, I want to tell you, you brothers, with humble and being as gracious as I can be toward the four of you who showed up in this podcast today, man, my heart really goes out to you all. But here's one thing that I struggle with on a daily basis. When I hear one of my Black people living next to me or somewhere else say to me, the man comes in their backyard, hurts their child, leaves, and then that man who owns that home, who is a Black man, who is a part of that child, asks the question, what are we supposed to do? Is the day that I stop feeling. And the realization for me is that at some point in time, when you look at the history of our civilization, the Irish and the Italians came here just like everybody else. And in the lower streets of Manhattan, they fought like animals behind what was valuable and what wasn't. They killed each other on the street. And that every other culture who came in contact with some kind of issue, some type of behavior as this, had always stood fast to defend themselves against the adversary. Now, I'm tired of y'all. I pulled this together, but I'm not tired of y'all, but I'm tired of this old dialogue. Is that we can constantly celebrate or go into ceremony about the death of one of our soldiers killed in the line of duty, simply being Black. Hey man, I'm not okay with that no more. I'm not okay with the realization that we have to succumb to some kind of conversation about that. If you hurt my child in my backyard, then I got a right to defend myself and my child. And as a result of this, I am sick and tired. There used to be all of these kinds of situations back in the day when we had defense things. When back in New Jersey, I don't know if you remember this time, not only did we have the Black Panthers, but we always had the order, not the Masons, but a Farrakhan. And they would train us and they would line us up in the streets and we would march. And we would go and be wherever the epicenter of white people who were hurting Black people, we would show up in force. And they would know whether or not if they want to continue doing what it is. But we were trained from young people to defend our communities. I believe that element is missing in us. And all of this pacifist conversation, I'm just at my ends with, because I don't want to bury another son of mine, not another one. And so with that said, my brothers, I do appreciate y'all so much more. I'm sure there's so much more that we can probably glean out of this conversation and to continue it. And I was hoping that this is the start of something for us to begin to, somehow, as Tony said, begin to self-determine. Get us go into where we want to go collectively out of body. I don't care so much about the personalities that are driving on this train, but I want to make sure that the principles in which we live by, we all to some degree adhere to and support in one another and get behind one another and continue to move forward. We are not invisible. In fact, Michael Jordan, myself, anybody else, I can tell you when there are 55 million people looking at it, when they click that damn TV on, we're not invisible. But the question still remains is, how do we find some self-significance within the climate in which we exist in to keep us strong and to support one another to stay within the game? As a Mr. Lake, when I remember meeting Mr. Lake struggled for a little bit in this, but he grasped hold of a direction, and with the support and fortitude in which he grasped, I watched that man scale mountains that were beyond my wildest imagination in a short period of time. The Poseys that are in the fights, the Cupids. So my brothers, I am so grateful and honored to have your company and your time here on Black Beat today. And man, anything that we can do as a company, as an organization to support the overall agenda, then let's get busy with it. I would expect to see you brothers at the table from here on out, making sure that the destination of this money that's supposed to support our community gets to our community. And it's going to be us that's going to help do that. So gentlemen, without further ado, I know you guys have been on here a little bit past our time, but man, I love the conversation that we've had, and I look forward to having much more of these conversations.